Welcome to Pebbles of Light. I'm your host, Ann Maxon. Have you ever felt a bit lost during the dark times of life's challenges? I know I have. I'm so grateful for those friends, loved ones, and even strangers that have provided me a pebble of light in the form of understanding and support. They've blessed my life, sometimes even more than they know. Seeing a little bright spot on the path has helped me to move forward when things are difficult. This show is here to celebrate those who add light to our lives. We will share some of their stories as well as ways in which to light the paths of others. Please come find me on Instagram and Facebook at Pebbles of Light, as well as at ammaxon.com. I love having the opportunity to interact with you and hear about those who've added a pebble of light to your path. Enjoy the show. Welcome to episode 17 of Pebbles of Light. I'm so grateful that you are here today. I have a wonderful interview with author Melinda Wheelwright Brown. In my mind, we're good friends, so I call her Mindy. She is the author of Eve and Adam, Discovering the Beautiful Balance, and she shares so many wonderful insights about finding balance and partnership, whether that is in our family life or in a spiritual sense. Before we get into it, let's get a quick word from this week's sponsor. This week's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I've always been a strong proponent of counseling services. Even in my professional career as a pharmacist, I've felt that the effects of any medication to help with anxiety or depression can only improve when it's paired with participation in counseling. But I get it. Sometimes there are barriers to being able to go to a counselor, whether that's finding time or figuring out the cost. BetterHelp strives to make counseling affordable, accessible, and convenient. They will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. If after meeting with your therapist you don't feel it's a good fit, it is easy and free to change. They even offer financial aid if needed, and have a very special offer for Pebbles of Light listeners. Get 10% off your first month when you go to betterhelp.com/pebbles. That's BetterHelp, HELP/pebbles. And now, back to the show. Since I've partnered with BetterHelp, I've had a number of friends try it. I've only heard good things from them, and they have found it to be a really good fit for their counseling needs. Be sure to check it out at betterhelp.com/pebbles, and you can get 10% off your first month. Let's talk about last week's Pebble. The episode was an interview with Kay West from A Worldwide Sisterhood and Becky Squire from Latter-day Woman magazine. The Pebble was to share your light with others and to recognize that every voice is needed, including yours. I ended up having to really take this to heart. I happened upon a number of other podcasts that interviewed this week's guest as well. I thought, oh man, I hope I ask some unique questions, and I hope that Pebbles of Light adds something more to the conversation. Then I remembered that I was supposed to be focusing on that in recognizing that my voice and the thoughts that you'll hear from Mindy this week are needed. And my friends, I think you'll learn something new from this interview, either by what is said or by what you feel. Enjoy. Thank you so much for being here. I'm grateful for the chance today to speak with Mindy Brown, the author of Eve and Adam. Mindy, would you be willing to give a little bit of background about you as well as your book, Eve and Adam?
I am a mother of 4. They're all raised and grown, and 2 married, 2 undergraduates, and a couple of grandbabies with another on the way. Those are kind of the big parts of my life right now. And the book was released almost a year ago. I spent about 4 years in the writing, research, publication process. The last year has been totally delightful, and getting to discuss it and share it and hear what people think and all those things. And I just love all the different opportunities it's brought. I am active on Instagram with a daughter and a daughter-in-law who helped me run an account we call Brave Like Eve. And we've made so many great friends there. In fact, that's how Anna and I got to know each other. So it's like you're the perfect example of how social media can be awesome. It has been so good for us. And so we've really enjoyed that. So that's a big part of what we do. And I'm just working on lots of different projects. I have a background in economics. That's what my degree is in from Brigham Young University many years ago. My husband, Doug, is a physician, and now that our nest is empty, we get to do a lot of fun, exciting things, mostly visiting our children. We love national parks. We like to plan little kind of nearby close getaways for just the 2 of us, and we're having a great time with it. We love it.
I was trying to remember our origin story of how we really met and how I became acquainted with Eve and Adam and started to learn more about that. And I think it might have been the LDS Living Book Club. I think might have been the first thing. And
Yes.
then I started to follow Brave Like Eve, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But just the amazing questions and the way that you were able to demonstrate this idea of partnership. And that's what we'll talk about today. I'm really excited to get your thoughts on the importance of partnership, not only in marriage, but also with the Spirit. At the beginning of Eve and Adam, you quote Doctrine and Covenants, section 42, verse 61, which says, "If thou shalt ask, thou shalt receive revelation upon revelation, knowledge upon knowledge, that thou mayest know the mysteries and peaceable things, that which bringeth joy, that which bringeth life eternal." And you go on to talk about kind of the origin story of Eve and Adam and how that came to be. And you said, "I've come to believe that when I have a problem with some aspect of life or the gospel, including women's issues and gender relations, it is a challenge of a fallen world, not a problem with God's plan for happiness, salvation, exaltation. I've learned firsthand that it takes work to learn how the pieces of the puzzle fit together, but I believe they do fit, and the finished product they form is beautiful." Can you talk a little bit about your process as you were writing Eve and Adam and trying to answer those questions that you had, that it was a partnership with the Spirit to help you recognize the truth of this balance between men and women?
Yes, that is such a great question. The way you framed all that I appreciate that. That's awesome. I would say, first off, it was absolutely a partnership with the Spirit every step of the way. And I think in hindsight, I am really grateful that I feel like I was able to begin the process from a healthy place where I have been a lifelong member of the church. I feel like one of my spiritual gifts is I am a believer. It's relatively easy for me to believe. I just was born with faith in that regard. And when I started to see gaps in what I believed was the doctrine and the plan, and then what I saw being implemented and what was happening to women, even modernly, although it was also historically, I had issues with things I was learning and studying and reading, but particularly in modern application and internationally, because I was involved with several nonprofits that were exposing me to some of the realities that are really quite harsh and unpleasant. And so I just recognized this gap between what life is like for so many women and what I thought it was supposed to be like. And so I really wanted to figure out, is there a gap? If not, that's a different question I'll be struggling with. But if there is a gap, why? And how can we fix it? How can we improve it so that there's better alignment with the plan and the doctrine and the truth? I mean, ultimately, it's all eternal truth we're talking about, and then lived reality. And so I really wanted that divine truth to be beautiful. I was coming at it from hoping it was beautiful, but I was also ready to take a microscope to it and really do whatever digging was required for me to make sense of this for myself. So it began as a completely individual project. It was not a book project at the beginning by any means. It gradually shifted to maybe a journaling project that my posterity might be blessed by. And then kind of the next step was the more that I began talking about it with other people. And I think one of the realities of any sort of project like this is it just brings people out of the woodwork. You just had no idea that everybody was asking the same questions you were. You know, it's not a coincidence. It's serendipitous, and the Lord's hand is involved when all of these people are finding their way to you and vice versa to have these discussions. And so it became much more of something that, oh boy, I think I need to share what I'm figuring out, and I think it could make a difference. And then, you know, further down the road, it was maybe there's actually a real book in this. And that's a scary thing to say out loud. And so I actually didn't say it out loud for a while. I kind of sat on that for a while. And then I felt like it was very clear that that was, in fact, a mission I was being called to. And I felt like, and this is a sweet part, I think, in the partnership with the Spirit, is that I felt like it was being offered to me. And it was my choice. I was not in any way feeling like I had to do this. It was frequently brought up again and again because, every time you had a really hard day, it's like, oh, do I really want to do this? This is hard. But it was always very gently reminded that you can choose, but it is time. And if you don't want to do this, there are other people who will. So we need to keep making progress or it will go somewhere else. And that it made me feel like, no, I see how I have been prepared for this. And the stepping stones have been put in place and I can do this as long as you're going to keep helping me. I can do this. And almost on a daily basis, when I had that frame of mind, I could see his help every step of the way. And it was beautiful. It was a spectacular experience for a few years, having such frequent evidence that the Lord knows me closely, cares what I'm doing, speaks my language to me, and was able to communicate ideas and feelings and guide me to all the truth that truly was hidden in plain sight. It just took gathering. And I just felt like I was gathering the pieces he wanted me to find and gather. And it was a complete pleasure and joy for me. It will always be one of the highlights of my life, I'm sure, that I was given that opportunity. And I'm so grateful I took it. I'm grateful I chose to accept it.
I'm grateful you took it too.
Thank you.
And I can't help, while you were talking about that, to think about how the Lord knows our capabilities and he knows our gifts and he knows our potential. There's a quote that says, the opportunity of a lifetime must be seized within the lifetime of the opportunity.
Yes, exactly.
And so you need to take that chance when you have it. The other thing I thought of was, I don't know the timeline of this, but Sister Sherry Dew had given a talk called Worth the Wrestle.
Yes.
And I feel like that may have kind of played in with that idea of, whoa, this is a complicated doctrine. I'm not sure where I stand on it. I'm going to wrestle with this.
Yes, her book is in my bibliography, and I quote it from it a couple of times, I think, in the final manuscript there. But that philosophy, there were lots of books that came out kind of in the 5-year period before I started writing and, before I started researching, that really did encourage the wrestle. And everything was, hey, questions are good, but come from a healthy place and, don't backtrack, don't give up your faith and your belief as you search them out, but hang on to that and let that inform how you search. And that I think that is such an important direction that we have taken in the culture of the church and how we talk about our questions and the wrestle. And yeah, I love that book. Sure, it's a super, super resource.
I think it's interesting too. There's sometimes when you use the word feminist, people, it kind of has a negative connotation. And I feel like that's softened over these past few years, especially as there's been so many books coming out. And I have a quote from a book that I know both of us love, written by a different Melinda Gates.
Yes, love it.
It's called The Moment of Lift, if you haven't read it. I've mentioned it on the podcast so many times. Hopefully people read it. But she says, being a feminist means believing that every woman should be able to use her voice and pursue her potential, and that women and men should all work together to take down the barriers and end the biases that still hold women back.
Yes.
So that idea you were talking about of the gap and how do we fix that gap? Do you think that your desire to learn more about it was somewhat perpetuated by the fact that you have young adult daughters living in the world and trying to navigate things and not only within the church, but within society, finding their place as women?
Yes, I think so. Although I would also say that my daughters haven't been as bothered by the gap as I was. I think it was really personal to me. Like I was losing sleep over things like bride price and, FGM, female genital mutilation, like that. I was really, really struggling just to keep breathing some days as I learned more about some of those things and pornography and all the effects of that. And I think just as a mother, it was really my mother heart, I think, more than my daughter heart, that caused me to just recognize, oh, this is awful. We have to do something about this. And I think I started the project thinking, well, this will inform my nonprofit work, and I will be more effective at my projects like boots on the ground type of things that I go and do. And I think one of the surprises was I realized that actually maybe the very best place I could apply my gifts and my talents was to share these ideas with the core membership of the church, because then it would almost be like I'd be training a whole army to go and fight this battle with me. And I wanted to be supported by many more people around me who we were all on the same page, feeling the same way with the same evidence in front of us to then move forward and make a big difference. And I think just probably my economical mindset felt like, actually that would be a more efficient way to do this. And I was really influenced by the phrase in the Book of Mormon about trying the virtue of the Word of God. And I felt like, I think this applies here, is like, let's get our doctrine straight and then let's all work together to do it better. And I think we're seeing that everywhere. It's not just me by any means. There's really feels like there is a bubbling up of this, like the dam is breaking and this is happening everywhere. And it's just time. It is time. And it's thrilling because there is a difference happening. And I am so grateful that my daughters can see it happening and participate in it. And so I'm thrilled on every level for every stage of life for women.
Every generation.
Yeah.
In the book, you also talk a little bit about how an attack on gender relationships and family in general is, an assault on society.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you share a little bit more about your thoughts on that?
Yes. So I think the way that I like to think of it is, I think sometimes we imagine kind of a Venn diagram where we have a bunch of circles and there's some degree of overlapping, right? And the circles might be family, society, government, church life, neighborhood, school, all these things. And it's just this messy Venn diagram with various levels of overlap. But I think it's actually a better model to see it as a bullseye with a series of spheres, with the center sphere being home and family, and actually even within that center sphere, husband and wife. And perhaps if we were going to say there's an absolute nucleus, like pinpoint center, well, that would be self, because we need to understand our personal divine identity first and foremost. I think it's very hard to have a healthy relationship with a spouse or anybody if you have fuzziness there. It's so much better served if you truly get your divine identity. And then if that first circle is your relationship with your spouse, and then your immediate family, and then your extended family, then you might say neighborhood, church community, just this growing kind of bullseye look at things, then you really recognize that everything we bring to all those other relationships is influenced by what happens in the home, in large part because that's where our most durable learning is happening as children. And as we're growing up, it's what's sinking in and sticking is how we've seen our parents' relationship and how we are having those relationships with our siblings and siblings of different genders, and just figuring out how we can all work together better and more effectively. And, nothing is more tangible, and in no space is our embodiment like more put to use than in a family where like you're literally punching each other in the arm and wrestling and, maybe even get an occasional kick of little kids on each other or pushing and shoving. And it's just this, hey, hold on, let's figure out how to make this work better. And if our children especially can see this beautiful interdependence happening in their parents, just imagine how that informs how they go out and interact with members of the opposite sex, whether that's in their elementary room classroom or on their playing field and whatever sports they're doing, or, you name it, it ripples out to all the other circles.
Yeah. So what role does sacrifice play in that partnership and that interdependence?
That is such a good element and piece that really matters. And my very favorite way to address that idea is actually to share this idea from Elder Hafen. So Bruce C. Hafen and his wife, Marie, have written so many great things about balanced interdependence between men and women. And he is a lawyer by profession and a very successful, incredibly wise and intelligent one. And one of the things that he has taught is this difference between a contract and a covenant. And so the way I have kind of interpreted what he has said very, very simply, because I am not the legal mind, I would say that a contract is a legal document that is carefully designed to allow either party to walk away from trouble. And officially, each participant is like literally required to give 50%. It's designed that way. So it's the epitome of like tit for tat or quid pro quo. But a covenant relationship is inherently different because it's designed to help both sides work through troubles. And it's a partnership that depends on both parties giving 100%. And so when we think of it that way, there has to be sacrifice involved. But I think it's so important when we talk about the word sacrifice, I really prefer the word investment. Because if we're going to dig into sacrifice, we see that it's really a matter of giving up something good now for something better later. Well, that's exactly the same definition of investment.
Exactly.
But sacrifice has a bit of a negative connotation to it, where investment, you can see the growth. I mean, it's all about growth, potential, and possibility. And so I think we always need to be looking at where could I give a little more and give a little better and give a little more effectively so that we have better growth together, a better interweaving of our lives together. Because what often tends to happen, even among the best of the best individuals in a marriage or in a partnership, is you live parallel lives because you're both busy and you're doing great things. But if you can't find a way to interweave those parallel lives, then you're really not sharing a life. You're living two separate lives, even if they're happening side by side. And what we want is for them to be interwoven because that's where the synergy comes into play. So instead of 1 + 1 equaling 2, now 1 + 1 can equal 5, especially if you choose to collaborate with the Lord as a couple. And then the sky's the limit. I mean, there's so much potential.
I love that word change of sacrifice to investment because I feel like sacrifice, you're thinking it's something you don't want to do.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
Who would want to sacrifice something, but to invest something, that's a totally different perspective. Thank you for that. I feel like, I can't remember if you talked about this in your book. In my mind, there's a section of your book where you talk a little bit about this in regards to, I want to say it was tennis. Does that sound familiar?
Well, I do mention tennis in there. Yes. And I think what the part you're talking about is actually something that my husband taught me very inadvertently. And when he read this portion of my manuscript, he was so surprised. I had no idea that that meant anything to you. I suppose I should have told him thank you much earlier. But we were having a discussion because, like I said, he's a physician. And in the medical world, especially in generations past, this is maybe not so common now, but there used to be kind of this element of wanting to moonlight. That's what they called when you would go work for other groups. So if you had time off, you could go moonlight somewhere to help you pay down your student loans, basically. And we did plenty of that in his residency. We were really blessed to have opportunities to do that because we all wanted to get out of debt. But when you join a partnership, especially a medical partnership, but it's also, I'm sure, the same with a law partnership or a business partnership or whatever, you're really combining your lives and tying them together. And if you don't bring your best to the partnership, it's really unfair. I mean, you're not holding up your end of the deal if you are going off and metaphorically moonlighting and using your best energy somewhere else, and you're coming back to the group exhausted and worn out, even if you were doing that on your own time, on your vacation time or whatever, you're still damaging your partnership. So you really have to be wise with how you're juggling that balance. And so for me, in my marriage, I actually would say that was one of our biggest struggles, and my biggest struggle is, I think by necessity, physician spouses often learn to be very independent because we're alone a lot, especially in the early years. And I really value my independence. Truth be told, I would love to live on a deserted island sometimes, and I'd be perfectly fine there all by myself. But that is not life, and that's not how it's meant to be. And when my husband kind of shared this, and he was sharing it in a matter of something that was going on at the hospital, and I was just sort of listening to him kind of musing over the issues. And I asked some questions like, well, wait, if that was vacation time, why does that matter? And then he kind of enlightened me to this idea that no, you have to bring your best to the partnership. But it really did cause me pause. And at the time, I had taken up tennis and I was playing a ton of tennis. And that was just one of the many hobbies and interests I had and things I was doing. But it happened to be particularly physically exhausting. And so by the time he would come home at night, I was often so tired, I just didn't really even feel like filling him in on what was going on in my life. I thought, well, I'll be nice and listen to what he wants to tell me, but he doesn't need to know all those details. And what I discovered was actually, I can do all my other things, but I have to save my best pieces for this partnership. And I have to let him in to all those things going on in my head and what I'm feeling during the day, because that's what's going to weave us together and make us more powerful. And that was really a turning point in our marriage and in our lives. And I think we became a much more effective partnership when I figured that out.
There's a great quote from Julie B. Beck from the talk, Choose Ye This Day to Serve the Lord, where she talks about, and I think she talks about it in other places too, I'm sure it's in Joy in the Covenant, and she talks about shift work and how being, especially as a mother, you work shifts.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the growing up years, the most important shift is that swing shift, that afternoon to dinner time craziness, and how you need to make sure that you have reserves and you are ready for that few hours of time in order to invest. So that idea, again, of giving up something during those other hours, if you need to, in order to make sure that you're prepared for that time when you're dedicated to your family.
That's exactly right. And it's really emotional energy that you need to keep in reserve. You can't be so drained emotionally that you can't have quality conversations where you're sharing.
There's a quote. So this was actually on an Instagram post that you guys had posted a while ago on Brave Like Eve from Sister Bingham. And she says, the most effective way to fulfill our divine potential is to work together, blessed by the power and authority of the priesthood. I love that idea of fulfilling our divine potential. Like that's what we were just talking about at the beginning of this interview, where you were talking about finding your place in writing this book and fulfilling part of your divine potential. What role for you does the power and the authority of the priesthood play in that for you? And how does that balance with your husband, Doug?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I first thought when you started sharing that quote from her, that amazing talk she gave about accomplishing the work of the Lord unitedly, and that's not the exact title of that talk, but it's along those lines. One of my very favorite points she makes early on in that talk is that she says that Adam and Eve realized that their mortal mission was identical to their eternal mission. And that phrase really struck me and has stuck with me, because I think we sometimes compartmentalize those, and somehow we think that it's like this half of my life and that half of my life. And that's such a limiting way to see that, because it's when the overlap is complete. They're 100% aligned, and we recognize that they're one and the same. Like, this is eternity right now. Eternity doesn't just start later. It started way back, and it's been happening all along. And we're meant to be enjoying and learning and growing through the entire process. And that's one of the pieces of our gospel perspective that I just find absolutely thrilling and so joyful is that it's all part of eternity happening right now, and it's all good. We can learn from all of it. And so I think when we keep that alignment, we can recognize that by working together and really tapping into the strength of our covenants, of being yoked with Christ, and we do that through making covenants with him. And then in a covenant marriage that's really all three pieces, man, woman, and deity, really the divine family, we can tap into these strengths that can make all the aspects of mortal life better and stronger and more effective. And when we do that and live that way, we're making such a difference in all of our brothers and sisters' lives as well. I mean, that's really the gathering and the bringing together of the family of God is through collaboration, divine collaboration and covenantal collaboration.
I'm learning so much. I feel like I've done that where you separate it. And I think part of it is the way that we talk about the plan of salvation, where you talk about, okay, first we're here, then we're here, and this is the test, and then we go back.
Yes.
And so a lot of times you think, oh, I'm not on vacation. I'm on like Survivor.
Yeah.
And,
Yes.
And then I need to go back. And so yeah, that's really insightful to think about it as just a continuity of the process, which of course it is, but sometimes in our brains we kind of forget that part of it.
Yeah. Well, and all process. I mean, that's one of the huge differences with how our faith tradition views Eve and Adam's story with the rest of the world who all know the story. I mean, even beyond just basic Christianity, everybody knows this origin story, and they tend to see it as events that were just concise, happened badly, usually it was a mistake, but we see it as this ongoing process, which Christ was there through the entire process.
Yeah.
And that is such a different perspective on it, and a very healthy, helpful perspective that helps us apply it much more effectively rather than misapplying it, which is what has often happened through the course of history with their story.
Yeah, I've read a quote. There's a talk. I think it's called The Man Adam. I think.
Oh, yes. There's a book called that. Yes, that's correct. That's in my bibliography, and I've drawn from that.
And it talks about when Christ was suffering in the Garden of Gethsemane and an angel came, that theoretically the angel was Adam or Michael.
Well,
have you heard that?
Yes, Bruce R. McConkie proposed that idea, and his comment was, who else would have been more suited for that to be? Now, if I can just take a little liberty and just point something out.
Yeah.
In fact, the very most suited would be Eve, because of what she was doing and how similar it was to what his role was. I mean, she was absolutely a type and shadow of Christ in her decision to be willing to make such a sacrifice for all of humanity. And I love that they share one of their very sacred titles, which is the name life. Eve's Hebrew name is Chava, and that means life. And Christ is the life and the light of this world. And that is a unique thing that is shared between the two of them that I find absolutely spectacularly beautiful and empowering. And, I think it's wonderful.
I love that idea. One of the interviews I was just telling you about that will air before this, it's a mother-daughter interview. And the daughter's son had passed away when he was 4.5 months old. And later, the grandmother, my friend Janet, was going through chemotherapy and had ended up with encephalitis and all sorts of really horrible things. And the son who had passed away had chemo and I don't know if he had radiation. He had a bone marrow transplant when he was just this little guy, right? Mm-hmm. And she had an experience where she felt an angelic presence. And it was this grandson of hers who it made sense that he would be the one to come because he had been through those very similar things. And so he was the one there to comfort.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I love that idea of Eve being able to be involved with that idea of comforting Christ because of her greater understanding of the emotional side of what was going on. And I mean, always the balance between the atonement and the fall.
Yes, yes, yes. So interwoven. I mean, talk about interdependent. They both completely depended on each other.
And they were both completely necessary for success.
Yes, absolutely. It's the interweaving of agency and at-one-ment that really is at work there. So important.
We mentioned a little bit at the beginning about your Instagram account, Brave Like Eve. And I personally, I love this account. I've been slacking on my social media, but it's one of my favorite ones. And you always incorporate great artwork and ask these just great ponder questions to think about things. Can you talk a little bit about how Brave Like Eve came to be, how you've decided to incorporate the artwork, and where you get your information?
I would love to. So with the publishing process, it was just necessary for me to step into the world of social media, which was totally foreign to me. And I was happy with that. I was so fine not being there. But I very bravely did it because I felt like I had to. And it truly has been delightful, like I said early on as we began. But I also knew that I couldn't do it alone, in large part because I am not technologically savvy. And luckily, I have a daughter, Candace, who's my third child, who shares a lot of my same interests and ideas. She's an art history major at BYU. She's a junior. And then I have a daughter-in-law who's married to my second child, Zach, and her name is Allie. And she is just wise and brilliant. And they're both avid readers and always searching for quality information and enlightenment. And so I asked both of them because they're in a season that I thought perhaps they might like to do this with me. And I said, hey, would you come on board and let's partnership in this. Let's do this together. And that has been the greatest blessing. I just can't even rave enough about how delightful it is to share this opportunity with those two who I love so, so much. And because of our different ages and kind of specialties, I think we can cover some broad approaches on things. And so it resonates with a lot of people. And Candace, especially because of her art background, said, well, yeah, let's make sure we have the best art. And I felt the same way. I love beautiful artwork, and so does Allie. And so that's kind of one little special feature of what we do. We feel like everything should be beautiful. We really appreciate beauty in all forms, and we want beautiful insights. Our focus is always, always encouraging and uplifting. I hope nobody ever reads anything that's a downer there. We just feel like there is enough downer everywhere else. Our job is to lift and encourage, invite bravery and courage into people's everyday world, and to look at things from a lens of bravery and really faithful courage, which is how I like to talk about one of Eve's very best characteristics was her faith and courage. So that's where we come from, and we love it. And as long as it keeps doing well, we'll keep doing it if people enjoy it. We love our whole community. We call them our brave friends, and we've gotten to know so many people that way. It's been a joy of COVID, frankly, because in a time when there has been so much loneliness and aloneness, we feel like we actually have about 3,000 wonderful friends, and that's a real gift.
Yeah, I would add insightful to the list.
Thank you.
Of things,
thank you.
Because I feel like I always learn something when I'm reading through what you guys post, your stories, the comments that people share. And I love that you frequently will ask a question and people answer in the question box, and then you're able to share. And so you really get a lot of insights from others as well. So I really love that community.
Thank you. That's our goal. Thank you so much.
The last question is always the same one. The purpose of Pebbles of Light is to celebrate those relationships that have helped brighten our path and in turn help us to light the paths of others. So who are one or two or three people who have placed a pebble of light in your path?
Oh, there are so many. And I love this. I love this focus of your podcast. I never, ever listen and am not brought to tears at some point, which for me is good. I like being reminded of the Spirit through my tears. So thank you. I actually have three. I'm going to share them very briefly each. The first is one of my young women's leaders when I was a young teenager who had the most insatiable thirst for knowledge and understanding that was just completely contagious to me. And I would say the thing that was so special about her is that she valued learning over teaching. And as a teenager, I could really sense the difference, and the difference spoke to me. And I think she just lit a spark in me that it's probably fair to say it kind of smoldered for many years, but it was there. And it eventually grew into kind of a raging bonfire where I just feel like there's just nothing that I wouldn't want to have a few hours to dive into. I'm a rabbit holer. And so I just think, if you dig deep enough, you're going to find some amazing connection between anything and the gospel and truth and light. And so I love that. And I attribute that to really her guiding me in that direction. So I love that Pebble. That has made a difference in my life. And then the other two would be Allie and Candace. And so I just say about each of them, Allie, one of her very special gifts is she is steady. She is just steady. And in any family where you have all sorts of roller coasters going on, it is such a blessing to have someone who is steadily logical, practical, faithful, dedicated, devoted. She is all of those things. And it is such a source of strength for me that I can know that if I need to lean there, she is solid enough to take it and I can lean for a moment. So that is a huge blessing. I love that light she adds to my life. And then Candace is just one of my dearest soulmates. I'm sure it's partially at least genetic. We speak the same soul language. And I don't just mean language. I mean dialect, accent, colloquialisms. We can pretty much read each other's minds and hearts in a way that is such a blessing. And I just have, especially as she's gotten older and matured and she's a full-grown adult now, she just has this wisdom that on days that I feel like I know I can get it from her. And I have been so grateful for her encouragement. She was the one through the book process, the writing process, that it got to the point where I would say if I was ever going to be traveling, I'd remind her where the flash drive was. And I would say, it's all backed up. If anything happens to me, you must finish. And she was so grateful when that burden was lifted, when the book was published. She said, oh, hallelujah, I can stop worrying about anything happening to you. But, it is a blessing to know that there is somebody who knows you and loves you so well that they would, in fact, finish what you had started if you were unable. And for me, that's Candace. And I just am so grateful for that. So those three and thousands of others. So thanks for giving me the opportunity to reflect on a few of those pebbles. That's really sweet.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for being here. I really have appreciated it. Like I said, I've learned so much in this little conversation and just great insights on things. Where can people find you? Where can people find your book? Let's end with that.
Okay, my book is available on Amazon or Deseret Book or, all the places. My full name and what you'll see on the cover is Melinda Wheelwright Brown. So don't be looking for Mindy because you won't find that. And then we're at Brave Like Eve. That's brave.like.eve. We'd love to have you join us there. Basically those places, lots of podcast opportunities and other things coming. So keep your eyes open and we'll always link to anything. We've got some highlights on our Instagram if you want to go back to different speaking events or whatever. I love to be able to share this truth with everyone and hear everyone's insights. And thank you for your great questions today. You're the one who pulled out the different topics of conversation and insight there. So thank you. It was fabulous. I love being with you.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for the chance I had to talk with Mindy. I had a number of takeaways from this episode, but I think my favorite was the idea of changing the word sacrifice to invest. So I'm going to use that for the Pebble of the Week. The Pebble of the Week is to identify something in your life that you've been thinking of as a sacrifice that you can change to think of as an investment. This can be related to a relationship with a partner, with a child, or with a friend. I'd love to hear your insights on this, so feel free to reach out either on Instagram or email me at hello@annmaxon.com. Be sure to check the full show notes for references and resources about these topics, as well as links to Mindy's book. Keep looking for the bright spots on your path, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you for tuning in today. More than what has been said, I hope that you've been able to listen to your thoughts and feelings. Maybe you've thought of someone who has brought light to your path. Let them know of your gratitude. Maybe you've been inspired as to how to add some light to your own path or the path of another. Do your best to act on those feelings and impressions. I would love to learn more about you and your experiences. Please come find me on Instagram and Facebook at Pebbles of Light. If you like what you hear, please review so we can spread this light further. You can find show notes and more resources at annmaxon.com. Until next time.